Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be starting in a few minutes. We're just going to wait another couple of minutes here so that folks can show up. Thanks for your patience. Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar. Bear with us for just 1 or 2 more minutes here to let attendees join the webinar, and then we'll be getting started. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Patrick, and I'm with the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute. We are delighted to be able to host this informational session on the online graduate certificate in greenhouse gas management at George Washington University. My role today is to be your guide through today's session. I will also facilitate the question and answer section that we'll have at the end of the webinar. Before we dive in, we've got a few logistical notes. First of all, the webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available in an email to participants as well as posted to the program website. The webinar will last about 30 minutes for presentations, with further time at the end for questions. At any time, you may ask a question to the presenters by typing the question into either the question box or the chat box in the GoToWebinar program. And if you experience technical difficulties, please contact the organizer, that's me, privately via the chat box. All right, our first speaker today will be Rachel Jonasson, the Program Director for the Greenhouse Gas Management Program at George Washington University. Over to you, Rachel.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Hi, I'm Professor Rachel Jonasson, the Director of Greenhouse Gas Management at the George Washington University, and I'm so glad to be able to meet you today. This is one of my favorite events, and I hope it gives you a good picture of what you will experience when you enroll in the Greenhouse Gas Management Certificate. Today, I'll give you information about the administration of the certificate program in greenhouse gas management and how your online learning will work. And then two others related to our program will give more details. Dr. Michael Gillenwater is Dean of the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute and someone I've worked with closely over the past few years as we developed this collaborative offering in greenhouse gas management, the first of its kind in a university graduate engineering program. Dr. Gillenwater will tell you more about the courses you will take in the program and how they prepare you for the rapidly growing field of greenhouse gas management. Professor Mark Trexler is our other speaker today. Professor Trexler is one of 5 faculty within the program who will support your learning, and he offers a deep background in greenhouse gas management and associated issues in climate change. Professor Trexler will give you more detail about the course he teaches in this program. It's called Greenhouse Gas Mitigation and is available to you this spring as you begin your training. And we have a special guest today, Ms. Mimi Nguyen, who graduated from George Washington with a certificate in greenhouse gas management last May, will give you a student's eye view of the program. Next slide. Let me begin by telling you about our institution. The George Washington University hosts about 25,000 students in 10 colleges and schools, including the School of Engineering and Applied Science, where your program is located. Within our school, there are 5 departments, and yours, Engineering Management and Systems Engineering, is one of the largest and oldest in the United States. Nearly all of our students are graduate students, and over half are off-campus students, like you will be in this program. So we are deeply steeped in graduate and professional education. The certificate, to create this certificate, we worked closely with the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute for several years. It's been fully approved by the GW Faculty Senate and the GW Board of Trustees. The 4 graduate level courses involved in the certificate are all 3 credit hours each. All courses can be applied to graduate programs at GW, including online programs that lead to a master's degree. All these courses are produced in conjunction with university experts in cinematography, animation, and the art and science of learning. Each course has an online librarian working directly with you and the instructor to ensure that you have access to all the online knowledge resources of the university. The faculty have been selected and appointed specially to this program in cooperation with GHGMI for the exact expertise and teaching ability required. Besides myself, they include Professors Marco Buttazzone, Todd Delaney, Phil Ludvigson, and Mark Trexler. You can learn more about the faculty at our website. 2 courses will be available this spring. The one that Dr. Trexler teaches, which he will tell you about shortly, and one taught by Professor Buttazzone on greenhouse gas management data systems and verification, essential knowledge to ensure reductions in greenhouse gas emissions are real. We are now accepting applications for the 4th cohort to go through this program, and enrollments have doubled each semester since we began. The expected minimum level of effort for each course is 7.5 hours per week. The minimum expectation is set by university regulation. The fees for this online offering are reduced from those for campus courses by about 1/2 and are $995 per credit hour, including a rebate from our institute. For admission to the program, these requirements hold. You must have a suitable bachelor's degree, such as engineering, mathematics, or science, or a bachelor's degree with appropriate work experience, which you must document. You must have a B or better average in your junior and senior years and must submit a transcript. You also must submit a statement of purpose indicating your career objectives and how you see the certificate fitting into those plans. Applications for the spring must be submitted within the next couple of weeks. Next slide, please. Now for the fun stuff. Let me tell you a little bit about some of the ways the courses are presented. You'll use Blackboard as the learning mechanism management system for each course. You will participate in live, synchronous sessions weekly using full two-way audio and video. This also allows private conferences with your professor or with fellow students. Blackboard is a really rich learning environment with many resources for each course. You're seeing a round-the-clock look at a few of those here. The exact resources will vary from one course to another. Let's go clockwise from the top left. You'll use and construct wikis to share knowledge with your colleagues. Short videos help to explain the tougher concepts like radiative forcing. The top center shows a few students discussing the problem of bunker fuels. You'll get access to interviews with experts in each area. In the upper right, I'm interviewing a world expert on solar energy. On the right, you see the Blackboard hosts discussion boards where you'll share your ideas and thoughts on a particular topic with other students. The spider diagram in the lower right shows a special tool Professor Trexler uses in his class, and he'll tell you more about that shortly. Because GW sits in the midst of the nation's government and international policy makers, you have special access to unique expertise. At the bottom center, you see experts from the Government Accountability Office discussing federal greenhouse gas emissions in an on-site video they helped us produce specially for this program. You'll encounter many similar special videos. On the left side, you see the actual Blackboard system with its blue navigation pane and an example exercise. Finally, in the center, you see one of the ways we help you keep your learning on track as the course progresses. Each learning video contains stopping points shown by the green boxes at the bottom. They may point to additional resources or may quiz you as illustrated here. You'll get instant feedback within the video and follow-up from your instructor. Well, I hope that gives you a flavor for what your learning will be like. Now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Gillenwater, who will tell you more about the content of the courses and how they prepare you for the global demand for experts in this field. Dr. Gillenwater.
Thank you, Dr. Jonathan, and welcome everyone to this webinar. Let me start by saying that all of us here at the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute are very proud to have co-developed this carbon management certificate program with George Washington University. And in large part, my career in this area began in Washington, D.C., and it's still, despite the current political situations, it's still a center of a lot of expertise to draw on while you're, while we develop this program. The courses that I'll introduce that are part of the program are based on our experience working on climate change policy, carbon markets, and greenhouse gas emissions accounting for the last 20 years. This experience includes active engagement in authoring the international guidelines for greenhouse gas inventories, both under the IPCC, which is the guidance for national level inventories, as well as the GHG protocol for companies. And it's not widely known, but GHGMI, Greenhouse Gas Management Institute, we are also the training and technical compliance. We train the technical compliance inspectors under the UNFCCC and Kyoto Protocol, and that similar program will be set up in the coming days for the Paris Agreement following the negotiations that just happened in Poland. This work has shown us that there's enormous need for expertise to support the implementation of climate change policies around the world. And this expertise is in short supply in both government and private sector. And now we're seeing action being taken by countries around the world as more and more companies and governments, especially in the developing world, realize that they're going to have to start addressing climate change and are beginning to build out programs and policies. What will work to instill in you is this understanding of the role of carbon management professional requires not only technical competency, but also an ethical and career commitment to something bigger than yourself. It's not completely hyperbolic to say that the fate of the world will rest on tomorrow's carbon managers. So this slide here that you see in front of you shows a spread of carbon pricing policies around the world. Already a quarter of global emissions are covered by emissions trading or taxing schemes, and this coverage is all but certain to grow. Next slide. The certificate program we're offering is both uniquely focused and comprehensive. Over 1 or 2 years, you will develop the skills needed to be a practicing carbon management expert. First, as you'll see in this list, you'll get an essential background on climate science and policy in both the domestic and international context. And I can't stress too much on how important it is to have a deep understanding of policy, given how much it drives action in greenhouse gas mitigation. We'll, of course, dive deep into the rules and methodologies for greenhouse gas accounting. This will focus on the energy sector because it's a dominant source of emissions. And when it comes to analyzing how to reduce emissions, which we call project level accounting, we'll also focus on energy efficiency and renewable energy technologies. An especially unique aspect of this curriculum is the course on how to use information technology for greenhouse gas data management, as well as the critical process of how to be a verifier of emissions data. Next slide. For those of you that choose the option of completing a final course project, there is the possibility of writing up your work and having it published as an article in the peer-reviewed Carbon Management Journal, which is sponsored by the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute and which I edit. So we can help you work on developing those kinds of manuscripts. Next slide. And now here you see the courses. There's 4 specific courses for the certificate program. In addition to receiving your carbon management certificate, your course credit is also fully transferable to a master's degree or PhD program, as Dr. Jonassen mentioned. So now let's dive deep into one of these courses. I'd like to introduce Dr. Trexler, who's instructing course 6292. He will give you an overview of this fundamental course. Mark?
Thanks, Michael, and welcome to folks on the webinar. I'm Dr. Mark Trexler. I've worked in the climate change space for the last 30 years. Did the first carbon offset work, did the first carbon footprints, built the first carbon business unit within an electric utility. So have been working on the front lines of greenhouse gas management for companies in particular for many, many years. And I bring this to the course because I think it's really key to understand where are companies coming from on this. And so it's really useful for anyone working in the greenhouse gas space to understand the difference between societal greenhouse gas management, for example, and corporate greenhouse gas management. Next slide. So the learning objectives of 6292 reflect that in terms of why are societal and business perceptions very different, where are things like carbon prices headed, which is a key variable in terms of what we'll do about climate change and whether we'll do anything about climate change. What can companies do? What are the options for pursuing climate change mitigation projects inside and outside company boundaries? What are the different risks of doing internal reductions versus external reductions and participating in carbon markets? And last, getting into sort of the key issue of scenario planning as a core element of how businesses ought to be tackling the climate change issue in terms of trying to think years into the future of what it might mean for them and the business community generally. Next slide. So we do a lot of different things and we use several different tools in 6292, partially because I'm a big fan of the idea of knowledge management. I think that the inability or the failure to teach knowledge management at the undergraduate level is really unfortunate because it's such a useful tool for people to have going into their professional development. So we'll use recorded videos in the class. We'll have 2 interactive sessions each week. We found that in prior classes that works a lot better than just the single session. And we'll use 2 different online tools One that Rachel mentioned earlier is the Climate Web, which is built with a very interesting knowledge management software called the Brain software. And you can see one view of it on there. It's actually a massive knowledge management system that contains pretty much all of the information that you could ever want to find when it comes to tackling climate change, whether from a societal perspective or from a business perspective. And we'll also use another tool that you just see a screenshot of there, Debate Graph, because one of the things we do in the class is that each student sort of takes on the persona of a different business sector, depending on their particular interests. But it might be the aviation sector, it might be agriculture, it might be forestry, whatever, and sort of does the assignments for the class through the lens of that sector, puts their work into the debate graph, which is available to everyone in the class. And so everyone can see sort of multiple sectoral perspectives on the topics that we're grappling with during the course of the class. Next slide. We'll get into lots of different topics, some of them quite technical in terms of marginal abatement cost curves and carbon price forecasting and additionality and carbon offsets and all these different things. So it really is a mix of both the technical and the more policy and business decision making oriented. Because when you go into a company, for example, if you go to work for a company in this space, you both need the skill sets of understanding how to do something, but you also need to understand how is your company thinking about this? How have they approached it in the past? And what relevance does that have for what you might want to recommend and propose and advocate for within the company? Next slide. One of the topics that we do get into in quite a bit of depth is the topic of carbon markets and project-based emissions reductions. We have a whole class on the topic of additionality, which is sort of the Achilles heel of carbon markets to date. And so we really do dig into that in quite a bit of depth. And again, with the Climate Web, for example, all of the class readings are available both on Blackboard through the GW system, and they're available in the Climate Web. But in the Climate Web, you'll also find links to lots of materials, far more than we could ever include as class readings, but lots of materials on all of these topics that allow you to dig quite a bit deeper into the topics. And you can come back to this after the class since it's an open access resource. Next slide. So overall, what we're trying to do with this class is develop a set of skills that complement the skills that you'll get in the other classes. Just for example, in terms of calculating your company's marginal abatement cost curve and thinking about that from a business perspective, because business marginal abatement cost curves are actually very different than societal marginal abatement cost curves, and people tend not to think about that nearly as much as they ought to. Evaluate the business case and risks of internal and external mitigation options and strategies, how to think about developing a internal carbon price, and just as important, how to think about forecasting carbon prices that might apply to your company's decision making over time, and being able to hit the ground running in a new greenhouse gas management role with a company or another organization. One of the things that we do at the very end of the class is put together a number of these checklists, and this you see here a slide of the internal advisory checklist. And this is if 2 or 3 years after this class you end up going to work for a company. Here is sort of a checklist of the key questions that you might want to ask yourself that would really bring you up to speed on how this company has approached the issue and what kinds of things you ought to be taking into account as you start your job in that company. And we have other checklists that sort of bring you back up to speed on external policy developments and external developments in greenhouse gas management generally. So we're trying to really develop a skill set and prepare you for a real job in this space. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that people might have on this class, which we're teaching in the spring. Rachel, back to you.
Great, wonderful. Thanks, Mark. Every time I hear you speak, I'm ever so pleased and grateful that we've got you as a faculty member in this program and the material and expertise you bring to it. I mentioned at the beginning that we have a guest here today, and so I want to introduce Ms. Mimi Nguyen. Mimi is a graduate of our certificate program. She's also a graduate from GW in the Engineering Management and Systems Engineering program, having received her master's degree and her greenhouse gas management certificate just this past spring in May. So I've asked Mimi if she would join us and give us a little sense of the program from a student's eye view. And Mimi, I have a few questions, if you don't mind. Could you maybe give us a sense of what the learning was like in the courses from your perspective? And you might have your mic on mute, Mimi.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, I would love to answer a couple of your questions. And for me, the courses were definitely challenging in comparison to the other courses that I was taking for my master's in engineering management. I feel like the certificate courses were definitely have a more specialized focus. Not only do the courses address the most up-to-date standards and methods to manage greenhouse gas, but they also demonstrate the specific methods to report, verify greenhouse gas emission. And in my opinion, the program overall is very well-rounded. The course have a great balance. They touch on most of the aspects of the science of climate change, while also allowing for the students to familiarize themselves with the more practical aspect of the field.
Okay, great. I think that that's what we're trying for. How about, could you give us a sense of what it's like to take these courses online?
Sure. It was a bit of a learning curve for me, but not so much in terms of the material itself, but more in terms of how to really excel in the untraditional setup of the classroom. In comparison to the way that the courses were set up with the tools and materials provided, there were not much of a difference in terms of classroom interaction compared to the more traditional classroom. You can still maintain excellent communication with your instructor and your colleagues inside and outside of the online session. Actually, in fact, I felt like I had more interaction overall with all my classmates in their certificate courses, just due to the way that the courses were structured. Moreover, I feel like with each online classroom session, with the typical 1 hour duration, I feel even more required to show up, like prepare, knowing my material, knowing all the relevant topic of the discussions, and having all my questions ready and prepared to be discussed in during the session.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you. I think that's really, really helpful. And I mean, are there any highlights from taking these classes that sort of stick in your mind that you want to share with folks?
I don't particularly have one unique highlight moment, but the one thing that really stands out to me after taking the certificate training was the tool and the skill set that the certificate training has provided me as an aspiring professional in the field of greenhouse gas management. And the instructors really put in their best effort to introduce the most up-to-date tools and softwares that are currently being utilized in the field.
Okay, great. Well, that's a nice endorsement. Would you recommend the certificate to others?
Yes, I would definitely recommend anyone that's interested or passionate about sustainability or greenhouse gas management to take the certificate training.
Thanks, Mimi. I think that's very helpful. And please stand by. There, folks might have specific questions for you and your experiences also. But right now, I'll turn it back over to you, Patrick.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark, Michael, Rachel, and Mimi. This has been a terrific overview of the program. And the most important thing is I wanted to leave a bit of time for attendee questions. We've had a few come up before and during the session. So to get us started, Rachel, can you start with any course, or do they need to be taken sequentially?
You know, we set the courses with a specific numbering system, and academia is always sort of theoretical about those things. But the reality is you can jump in anywhere you want. Most people are going to get these courses under their belt in a fairly quick time period, and they're mutually supportive. One thing I will say is that you probably want to talk with your individual instructors, let them know your background, and make sure that that background allows you to jump into a particular course. If you want to be really strictly academic about it, then I would say take them in the order of the numbering. But again, feel free to jump in and take any one of the courses at any time.
Great, thank you. And we've got actually couple questions for you, which I'm going to bundle together. We have a listener asking if you could state again the fee for one credit, and then are there any scholarships available?
Sure. Fee for a single credit in the 3 credit courses is $995 per credit hour. Okay, so multiply by 3 to figure out the total on that. And individual scholarships, we don't have within our program scholarships. We've already reduced the price on this by 50% from what the university would otherwise have us charge. So in a sense, you're getting that scholarship by way of our institute providing that support that allows you to do it for essentially half price, assuming you're accepted into the program, that is. So that's the best we can offer. Once you're accepted into the program, the resources of the university are available to you as a graduate student in George Washington University. So you can always speak to the financial aid office there. But all that by university policy has to be done after you're admitted to the program.
Great, thank you. Mark, a question for you. How will this certificate qualify the students for jobs or businesses in sustainable green growth?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the topics that we're talking about here are enormous. One could say that sustainable green growth is more of perhaps a climate finance topic, a sustainability topic, and it might not actually have an enormous overlap with a lot of the very specific skill sets associated with greenhouse gas management. At the same time, I think what people will find is that they're wearing multiple hats in a lot of these organizations, and that if you come into an organization with the skill sets that you get from this certificate, you'll certainly be in a better position to then move into other roles and responsibilities within the company, even though it might not be based specifically on the technical knowledge that you're getting out of some of these courses.
Great, thank you. And a question for Michael. Michael, does the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute provide assistance and have data for graduate research related to climate change?
Well, yes. I mean, I guess there's several ways to answer that. One is, there's a for a graduate from the certificate program that want to go even deeper, there's additional courses that GHGMI offers, shorter kind of professional courses not for academic credit. That may be of interest, but there's also opportunities, for internships or to do small research projects. I mentioned the opportunity to publish something in the journal. Obviously, you'd have to, work on a draft manuscript, and we would be happy to work with you on that, and actually even, possibly identify a topic of mutual interest that could then be, become a research product. So yeah, there'd be definitely opportunities for additional work, through an internship or through some other small special project for students that wanted to go to that next level of effort.
Great, thank you for the clarification there. Let's see, Rachel, we've got another question coming in. What are the total number of credits required to earn the certificate?
Good question. Somebody's working on their mathematics right now, I have a feeling. So we have each course is a 3 credit hour course, and there are 4 courses that are required in order to earn a certificate. So 4 times 3, as I remember, is 12. So you figure on your costs as being for 12 credit hours throughout the program altogether.
Great, thank you. We're probably going to take about 2 more questions here. Mark, another question for you regarding the size and scope of the Climate Web knowledge management program you were talking about.
Yeah, that and maybe I'll make another follow-up point in response to Michael just came back from Poland and the conference of the parties over there. But let me start with the first, the Climate Web, which we've been building for about 6 years, has about 15,000 documents in it and about 25,000 URLs and 2,000 videos. But much more than that, we extract key graphics, we extract key ideas, we link them all together. And this software, by the way, is not custom built for this. It's a commercial software that anyone can use, and there's a great free version of the software that you can get at www.thebrain.com. And I, regardless of this class, regardless of anything, I would really encourage people to explore it and to start thinking about using this kind of a tool for their own knowledge management purposes. But what we basically do is pull anything and everything into the Climate Web that we think can really help people explore the 100 different topics that are sort of really important to the climate change issue, all the way from the science to the psychology to the economics to the communications of climate change. So it's a massive and in some ways somewhat intimidating system. But let me just make a very quick follow-up point to something Michael said as well. A year ago, the landscape for this certificate, I think, has really changed just in the last year, particularly when you think about this from a business perspective, because in the last year, many more companies have sort of stepped up and started talking about climate change and climate change policy and making climate change commitments. And the very few people in those companies have the skill sets and the knowledge bases to really do a lot of that very effectively. And I was just talking to the EH&S manager of a Fortune 100 company yesterday, and he was saying, we're interested in this topic of scenario planning. We don't know anything about it. We've talked to a lot of our consultants. They don't know anything about it. And so we're a little bit lost in terms of how do we as a company think about climate change scenario planning. And that's one of the things we cover in 6292, for example. But I think it really is an interesting time in this space, and that the need for these skill sets is really on a significant uptick now, much more than it has been in the last 5 years.
That's great. Thank you for the comprehensive answer there. We'll do one last question. Rachel, can the courses be taken by a group of specialists together, or is it in a dedicated singular manner?
Yeah, good question, an interesting question. GW, and in particular the department where I reside, engineering management and systems engineering, actually has enormous experience in online courses. I think the last count is something like 500 students taking online courses every semester. A lot of those offerings are geared towards groups of students from sometimes an individual company will fill up an entire class. So yeah, cohorts, we can arrange cohorts. We've got a lot of experience with that kind of thing. So multiple students working together, coming from a particular company or from a particular group are very welcome, and we can definitely customize things in settings like that.
Great, thank you. Well, we'll close now. First of all, I wanted to thank our panelists today. And secondly, thank you all for carving out time in your day to learn more about the program. You will be receiving this webinar recording in a follow-up email. And likewise, in the event I missed your question, or if you think up additional questions, please do not hesitate to email it to Rachel. I know she would be more than happy to answer any and all inquiries. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks once again for tuning in.
Thanks, Patrick. Wonderful job hosting this. Really appreciate your work.